Greetings to all learners. Myself Sharda Devre, Associate Professor, Government College of Pharmacy, Amravati, welcomes you to Lecture 22, Clinical Evaluation Guidelines and Pharmacovigilance under the Week 5, Safety, Efficacy and Toxicity of Traditional Plant Drugs in a self-paced course, Indian Traditional Medicinal and Aromatic Plants. In a previous lecture, we have learned about the preclinical studies. These studies to understand the safety, efficacy, toxicity, and pharmacokinetics of the plant extracts and derived formulations. And it is the combination of the in silico, in vitro, ex vivo, and in vivo studies. In ex vivo, we can utilize the tissues or the cell lines that are either from the animals or also from the human beings. While in vivo studies, we have to use the whole animal, either rat, mouse, or big animals like the dog, goat, etc. After getting the promising results from the preclinical studies, then the one investigator or that institute or company need to apply for the clinical trials. These clinical trials means these are the pattern of a study on the human beings, directly on the human beings, and for that they have to submit the investigational new drug application, which is also called as IND application, to the appropriate authority of that particular country. And then the clinical trial approval is means clinical trials are approved, and these clinical trials are of a phase 4 phases: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 and phase 4. These phases are depending upon the number of human beings are used and the success rates, and actually the what type of the results are expected from these phases. So phase 1 uses the healthy volunteer, healthy human beings, and that determines the whether the drug is safe or not for the further checking of the efficacy. While in a phase 2, the patients of a specific disease are registered, and this type of the study determines whether drug can have any efficacy or whether it will give the any therapeutic effect or not. In a phase 3, 300 to 3000 patients are registered, and then these help to determine the various therapeutic effects in detail. And last phase is, it is the phase 4, which is called as a post marketing surveillance. And here anyone who is getting the who is getting the treatment with that particular plant or plant extracts, that can be evaluated by the physicians or by the patient itself to monitor the long-term effects. So thus in phase 1, healthy volunteers are there and only 20 to 100, while in phase 2 patients are there but from 100 to 300 numbers, while in a phase 3 numbers increased. And actually the phase 3 determines whether the drug will be in a market or not. If phase 3 is giving the very successful and promising results, then phase 4, that is after marketing, then the drugs effects are studied for a long period of time to understand the safety efficacy in more detail. Now next, it is the pharmacovigilance, and this pharmacovigilance is actually the detection, assessment and prevention of the adverse drug reactions in humans. And it is very different from the clinical trials, because in clinical trials like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, before the drug marketing this need to be done, while phase 4, that is after the marketing of the drug, and this is for the particular period of a time. But in case of the pharmacovigilance, this is throughout the life of that drug, or whatever the duration the drug is utilized, the information is collected, gathered, and the data is assessed for the safety, efficacy in any type of the side effects, adverse effect, adverse events, etc. Same like that of preclinical evaluation, there are also the guidelines for the clinical evaluation, and these are given by the WHO, Ayush, CDSCO, and ICH. These guidelines emphasizes on the various phases of the clinical trials or preliminary requirements and the protocol discussion, ethical principles discussion, and etc. So that the humans or throughout the world we should get the safe and efficacious medicines in minimum dose. So either preclinical study or clinical studies, we need to do the extrapolation of the dose based on the certain criterias. And here it is a one table which is mentioning the human equivalent dose calculation based on the body surface area. So for according to the species and reference body weight, working body range, and body surface area, there is a conversion of the animal dose in milligram per kg to the human equivalent dose in milligram, and either of that. So in this way we can get the doses for the further studies, starting dose, minimum dose, or higher dose for the clinical studies based on the preclinical data. There is always questions that whether to perform preclinical or clinical studies of the Ayush drugs or not. So for traditional medicinal plants or derived products, there is a no need if the safety, efficacy, or toxicity evidences are already available and the proofs are there. But if the combinations are different, extracts are different, solvents are utilized are different than that of the ancient text, then route of administration is different, then that time it becomes necessary to perform the preclinical as well as the clinical studies. Ayush has provided the guidelines for the clinical trials of the traditional medicinal plants and derived products. And here in the introduction and definition, the various terms related to the clinical trials and objectives behind such guidelines are mentioned. In a prerequisite for the study, the different details of the uh, uh, drug or Ayurvedic drug or Unani drug, Siddha drug, whatever the investigational drugs, its information in brief, it is need to be mentioned. Then investigational ASU drug, patent or proprietary medicines information, its botanical identity, or if it is in a combination, then each drug's quantity, then quality as well as the doses, then its quality control parameters, storage, shelf life, everything need to be mentioned. Then preclinical supporting data, which always play the important role. If it is not available, or if it is available through the ancient text, then that can be provided. And if it is there, then all the details of in vitro, in vivo, ex vivo, or cell human cell studies, that need to be provided, because this gives idea about the safety, efficacy, toxicity of the drug, and future any type of the side effects, adverse effects that can be expected, and precautionary measures can be able to take in advance. Protocol and relevant components of the protocol, that clinical trial protocol need to be submitted, and that is either by the sponsor or the investigators. And this must consist of the information of the investigational drug, then duration, whether multicentric or single institutional, then team members, then the inclusion and exclusion criteria for the volunteers and patients, then the informed consent data, and whether the study will be the having the blinding, double blinding, single blinding, or whether it will be the parallel or cross over design. Then its compensation related guidelines, or details, financial assistance to the patients or volunteers in different forms, either in the death, or if there is any type of the injury or disability due to the drug, then placebo and various combinations, data collection, data monitoring, and the various meetings which are required to convey to the regulatory authorities for the progress of the clinical trial. So everything is mentioned in written in these protocols. Then ethical and safety considerations. So it is very necessary that the patient safety or patient's dignity, patient's privacy need to be maintained during the clinical trials. And under the ethical principles, it is known to the investigators institute, that about the Nuremberg's 10-point code, which is very old and first type of the ethical principle for the clinical trials. Then Belmonte report, and the most followed type of the ethical principle, it is of a World Medical Association's declaration of Helsinki. And according to that, these principles of the patient safety, efficacy, or its compensations, or data management, or data safety, data confidentiality, everything need to be followed. Then ethics committee, so each and every institute that are involved in the clinical trials need to maintain the ethics committee, working committee, and the all protocols should be evaluated by this ethics committee. Ethics committee must provide the guidance to the clinical trial members, that is to the sponsors, monitors or investigators, and it should be the liaising between the regulatory national or international regulatory authorities and with that of the clinical trial institutions. Then informed consent process is where the patients or volunteers get the details about the clinical trial process, its dose, its duration, then its reason, uh, then whatever the compensations, and the right to withdraw, right to understand, and right to uh, understand the clinical trial protocol in own language uh, that can be understand. Then next, it is the responsibilities of the sponsor, monitor or investigator that are also mentioned in these guidelines, so that the all type of the clinical trials must be carried out in a smooth way to understand the safety, efficacy, and then the toxicity of the Ayush products or the derived herbal medicines. Data safety management, it is very important to whatever the data is obtained, whether in a hard copy form or it is maintained in electronic form, so its safety must be there. It should not be leaked, it should not affect to the dignity and confidentiality related to the patients. Then quality assurance, that there must be certain SOPs and that must be followed, that must be monitored by the either internal or external monitoring committees. Further, the statistics of the various clinical trials or its results must be gathered and communicated to the authorities whenever it is the required. And then special concerns, these are always related to the various type of the sensitive matters, like the pregnant or pediatric patients, or the compensations related other issues, or IPR, intellectual property related issues, secrecy of the drugs, and etc. Then there are the appendices that are given, that is a guidelines for the evaluation of Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani medicines. Then ethical issues, that is for the biomedical research, human participants. Then investigators brochures and other essential documents that are mentioned in these guidelines. So after this, there is also Ayush is focusing on the pharmacovigilance program of the ASU and H drugs, that is Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani and homeopathy drugs. And Ministry of Ayush through the National Pharmacovigilance Coordination Center, that is All India Institute of Ayurveda, New Delhi. And then there are the intermediary pharmacovigilance centers in Ayurveda, Unani, homeopathy and Siddha. In Ayurveda, there are two centers, that is from the Jaipur and the Jamnagar, and in Unani there is from the Bangalore, and homeopathy Kolkata, and for Siddha it is from the Chennai. For Sowa Rigpa it is in a Ladakh. So from these centers there is a monitoring of the pharmacovigilance related data. There are also 75 peripheral pharmacological centers based on the regions of the India, that is western or eastern, then north and south. Next, it is the CDSU guidelines for the good clinical practices, same like that of the Ayush guidelines, or Ayush guidelines are actually based on the CDSU guidelines. Here also there is a prerequisite for the study, that is the investigational pharmaceutical products information, then preclinical supporting data, then clinical trial protocol, relevant components of the protocol, that is the general information, objectives and justification of such studies, then ethical considerations, study design, inclusion exclusion criteria or withdrawal of the subjects. So objectives and justification plays the very important role, that we cannot repeat again and again the preclinical or clinical trials of the same products or same type of the products. Hence it becomes necessary to provide the data that such a type of the clinical studies are not done, or the safety efficacy data is not available, dose related data is not available, so that can be justified with that. Inclusion exclusion criteria of the patients, that which type of patients will be included and which type of patients will be excluded. Suppose like a pregnant or pediatric or particular age patients only included, other age patients excluded. Then withdrawal of the subjects, most of the time it happens in a clinical trials, or it is the routine part that most of the subjects that are patients or volunteers withdraws, and hence that data need to be maintained properly. Then handling of the product, how it should be stored during the clinical trials, what temperature, humidity conditions, labeling, and all these things should be mentioned. Assessment of the efficacy, how efficacy is getting monitored for that medicinal plant and derived products. Assessment of the safety, what parameters are there, and according to that efficacy and safety is getting noted. Then its statistics, then further the data handling management, its confidentiality, its quality control and quality assurance through the internal and external committees. Then the finance and the insurance of the clinical trial for the patients as well as for the people, those who are involved in the clinical trials. Publication policies, how much data can be able to be published, in what form it need to be published, who will able to publish it. And further it is the exact evaluation of the clinical trial, whether it is successful or promising, or is there any lacuna, and etc. Then ethical and safety considerations, that is through the ethics committee. Basic responsibilities, then there are the submission of the applications, and then decision making, reviews and record keeping of these all ethics committee matters. And then there are the other consideration. Informed consent plays the very important role, so that the whatever essential information of the clinical trial is understood by the patients or volunteers, and they must understand the compensations of their participations, and whatever the compensation for the accidental injury, everything must be known by the subjects. Then there are the responsibilities of the sponsor, monitor, investigators are mentioned, that how they must give attention to the various responsibilities allocated to them, either related to the studies, monitoring of the patients, collection of the data, or financial related aspects, or drug or medicinal plant and derived product storage. Everything must be maintained, or should be carried out in accordance with the responsibilities assigned. Then record keeping and data handling is very important, because that further plays the role in consideration for the final drug approval. Quality assurance and the other special concerns, like that of the vaccines or contraceptives or other medical devices, and the use of the x-ray or other materials. Then clinical trials of the herbal remedies, that is the medicinal plants and categories of the herbal product, everything is mentioned in the CDSCO guidelines for the good clinical practices. Thus, in lecture 22, clinical evaluation guidelines and pharmacovigilance, we have learned the different phases of the clinical trials, that is a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. And we have also understood the meaning of the pharmacovigilance, and then how Ayush and CDSU are together playing the important role for the clinical trial studies of the traditional medicinal plants and derived products, so that the world should get the safe and quality Indian traditional medicinal plant products. Thank you.